Welcome back to my kitchen. I'm so excited to have you back with me today. We're going to make another great recipe. It's a great recipe for adults to make, as well as my boys and girls in first grade. It's called fruit and oat squares, and it has a lot of ingredients you probably have in your kitchen already. Let's go ahead and look at them first, all right? Join me over here. You're going to need some quick oats. It calls for 1 cup, and I've already got 1 cup measured out here. Don't use the old-fashioned oats. I always just use the quick oats. Then it calls for 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Now, that's not the self-rising kind. 1 cup of all-purpose. You'll need some brown sugar, and I use light brown sugar pretty much all the time, and it calls for 3/4 of a cup. I've already got it measured out here. We're going to need a little bit of baking soda. It says we are going to need a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And then we're going to need 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And we're going to need a little bit of cinnamon. We're going to need 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. And we're going to need part of a stick of butter. It's 1/3 of a cup, which is 5 tablespoons and part of 1. So that would be my whole one. But I'm going to use this part, which would be my 1/3 cup, and I'm going to melt it in a little bit. And then you're going to need some strawberry preserves or whatever flavor you like. Now you do need to do preserves because if you just do jelly, it'll be too runny. So I picked strawberry preserves, but you could do peach, apricot, anything that you would like as well. You will also need a bowl to mix all this in. You will need a 9-inch square pan, or if you don't have a 9-inch, you could use an 8-inch, or you could use a long oblong pan as long as the sides are kind of straight on it. But I've got a stoneware one here that I'm using today. And you'll need some aluminum foil. And those are the items you'll need to make fruit and oat squares. So let's get the oven turned on to 350 real quick, and then we'll get started. So I've got my oven preheating right now. Let's get our pan ready. And it says in our recipe to put some aluminum foil in the bottom of it, and we just press it down. This is going to make getting our fruit and oat squares out a lot easier. After it's cooled, we'll just pick it up and go with it. Now, it says you could spray, but I'm not going to use spray. I'm just going to take part of my stick of butter that I'm not using in the recipe, and I'm going to just go all over it so it's a little bit more natural instead of using that cooking spray. I got to hold it down a little bit. And we're going to go up the sides a little bit too. This is a great recipe to make because kids love to butter the pan and put out all these ingredients. And you don't have to use the stove, you'll just be using the oven for a little bit. Alright, so I have it all buttered and ready to go. So I'll take my large mixing bowl, we'll come over here, and we'll start adding our ingredients. We're going to add our 1 cup of quick oats. We'll add our 1 cup of all-purpose flour. We're going to add our 3/4 cup of brown sugar. And let me get something to stir with. Wasn't ready, was I? We're going to mix that up real good with a nice fork. Get all the clumps out of it. We're going to add the rest of these ingredients to it as well. We're not adding the preserves to it just yet. That'll be in a different phase. So we're going to add our baking soda, and our recipe calls for a 1/2 teaspoon. So I'm going to find my 1/2 teaspoon. And I just kind of take it and let it measure level. And I'll do my 1/2 teaspoon in there. And it calls for salt. It calls for 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So I'll go with my littlest one that I have. And I'll measure out 1/4 teaspoon of salt, or close to it. Okay, and then we're gonna need to add some cinnamon to it. We also use 1/4 teaspoon. So I'm gonna pop the lid off of that to make it much easier. I don't need the shaker for it. That's about 1/4. It's always good to have a little extra cinnamon. And I'm gonna stir that up real good. Get all that cinnamon and baking soda and salt mixed in with our recipe. This recipe is great to make if you like those cereal bars that you can buy, like the Nutri-Grain cereal bars. I've made this recipe at school and sent to a lot of people, and they just love it. Kind of like my no-bake cookies. These fruit and oat squares are really popular. So I'm gonna take my butter that I have, and I'm gonna pop it in a bowl, and I'm gonna cover it up with a paper towel, and I'm gonna pop it in the microwave, and I'm gonna melt it for about 1 minute. So I'll be right back. So our butter is finished melting. I covered it up with a paper towel so it wouldn't have any splatters. So we have 1/3 cup of melted butter. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add this to our mixture, our crumb mixture that's got the flour, the brown sugar, the quick oats, move that out of the way, and it's got our salt and baking soda and cinnamon in it. So I'm gonna mix that up very good. Get all that butter mixed in with it because we want all those ingredients to be wet. This will be a really fun thing to do with your parents, boys and girls. Now, you always want to make sure you get your parents to help you with the oven and even the microwave, because that butter was pretty hot. You would probably need oven mitts for that to make sure when you pull that out. My hands are a little bit tougher and I can stand heat a little bit better. So I almost have it all mixed up. It's always great to use a clear bowl. You can tell if you're getting all your dry ingredients mixed in. And we're gonna end up scooping out 3/4 cup of this mixture and save and put back over the top. Because you know your fruit and cereal bars that you buy in the store, they have a bottom layer, and then they have the fruit preserve layer, and then there's a top layer. But these are much more yummier than the ones you can buy in the store. All right, scrape that off. And I've got my measuring cup set to 3/4 cup there, and I'm gonna hold it still, and I'm gonna go ahead and scoop out about 3/4 cup and save that for our top layer. Make sure it looks pretty good. So we're gonna save that for later. And we're gonna pour all of this in our pan that we buttered earlier. And drop it in there. Now it looks like there was just a little bit of dry that didn't get mixed in, and that's okay, because I'm gonna take my clean hands and I'm just gonna gently press that down. This is your bottom layer, and we're gonna bake this bottom layer. Remember, I have my oven preheating to 350 degrees. We're gonna bake it for about 5 to 7 minutes. Now, my oven is fairly new, so it runs true to the temperature. If I've turned it to 350, then I know it's at 350. But if you have an older oven, sometimes it's a good idea, see, that minute it's ready. Sometimes it's a good idea to get one of those thermometers, like at the dollar store or Walmart, and just put in there. It's round and you can just hang it on the rack, and it will tell you what temperature your oven really is. When we first bought our house, we had an older wall oven, and I baked a cake the first time in it with the normal temperature that I use, and it baked way too quick, and I realized that it was not true to the right temperature. So always use one of those thermometers if you have an older one. So I've got all my crumbs pressed down, and so I'm gonna bake it about 5 to 7 minutes, and we'll pop it in the oven, and will join me in just a minute. So it's getting ready to come out of the oven, and I'll pull it out. Make sure you have your oven mitts on. Turn off my timer. Turn off my stove. Open it up. Parents, you definitely want to help with this. Don't look at my dirty stove. it on my hot plate. And then I'm gonna take my strawberry preserves and I'm gonna spoon it over. Now this is the part that can get a little tricky because these crumbs can still pull away pretty easily. So I kind of try to spread it out all over. Sometimes if you heat up the strawberry preserves or whatever type of preserves you're using, it will help them smooth just a little bit better. But they never tell you these things in these recipes. How hard it can be to put that crumb topping, put something on top of a crumb topping without it pulling away. And sometimes I just have a mess, but it's still gonna be good. Even if a recipe doesn't turn out as beautiful as you like, it usually still eats pretty well if you put the right ingredients in. Now I've tried peach preserves with these and they're good. Apple would be good. Blueberry, blackberry preserves. You don't mind all the seeds. And push the rest of those out. Make sure I got them. Take my little scraper, scrape off every little bit. Sometimes I use more than 3/4 of a cup of preserves in here. Sometimes I'll use just a whole cup, but then sometimes it's also a little bit too juicy. Get that little bit right there down in there. You see how I picked it up and it already gathered up a little bit of the crumb? We're gonna be putting some crumb on top of it. So that's okay if it pulls a little bit. You just gotta do it real gentle. Very gently. Because remember, we're making cereal bars, these fruit and oat squares. They smell so good. I wish you could smell them. I can smell the cinnamon in them. Now, if you have an allergy to gluten and you can't have the 1 cup of all-purpose flour, I bet you could use some of the alternative flours that are out there. And if you have maybe a dairy, can't do dairy, you're allergic to dairy, I bet there's some other alternatives you can use in place of that. I'm not an expert on that, but I tried to pick a recipe in case you had an allergy. This is something that you could do. I'll get my oven mitts and turn it. I don't want to turn it with my hand and get burned. So I'm doing pretty good getting it all spread out. Just very carefully. I see, or at least I find the back of a spoon works much better than a spreader. Ooh, that's gonna be so yummy. You can make this for your mom for Mother's Day. This will keep for about 3 days in a nice airtight container. Oh, I think I got it all spread on. So here would be the fun part you could help out with. So I'm gonna take my 3/4 cup of crumbs that I have reserved. And you know what? I turned off my stove and I just realized I should have left my stove on. So let me go back and turn it right back on. It's still hot. Totally forgot about that. So I'm gonna put this 3/4 of crumb mixture that I have reserved on top. And then we're gonna put it back in the oven and bake it for about 20 to 25 minutes at that same temperature, 350. But I'm sure you won't forget to turn your oven off like I did. But I do that all the time. That's part of having fun in the kitchen. You make mistakes. Sometimes they're big mistakes and sometimes they're little ones like that. All my crumbs. All right, I'm gonna just gently take my hand because that part's cool. I wouldn't want to touch the pan and just kind of gently tap it down. This kind of reminds me of a crisp. Put my gloves back on and I want to pop it in the oven. And I'm going to set my timer down here. Timer, 25 minutes. We'll just go with 25. So I'll join me back in just a moment, okay? So our timer is just getting ready to go off. We had done 25 minutes originally, but you could do 20 to 25. Stop our timer, turn our oven off for sure this time. We're finished with it. Get my oven mitts on. smell so wonderful. So right now it really needs to cool completely. And since I've got mine in a stoneware pan, it's gonna take a little bit longer to cool, and all of this will kind of solidify back again. And once it's totally cool, we'll come back together and I'll show you how I cut it, but it just looks wonderful. So it's been a couple of hours since my fruit and oat squares have cooled, and if you'll notice, I've taken them out of the pan that I baked them in. I did that about 45 minutes after I baked them and let them cool. And then just to speed up the cooling process, I put them on a cooling rack. And so now they're much stiffer. And so I'm gonna just transfer them over here to my cutting board. And I'm gonna actually put on some gloves because I'll be touching these some to get them on the plate. So I'd rather use gloves. They're kind of sticky too. Now these will keep about 3 days if you wrap them up, put them in a container, or you could freeze them and wrap them up and they'll last about a month. I'm not one to freeze things. So if you'll notice, it's pretty gooey still. It's cooled pretty much completely. So this little bit around the edge would be a great thing for your family to nibble on. But I'll take a serrated knife and I'll cut. And it says it'll make about 16 squares. So I'm gonna do 4 rows this way. And then I'll turn it and do 4 rows the other way. These are not as neat as like the cereal bars that you can buy, but I promise you they are better for you because they don't have all the additives. They don't last as long because they don't have the preservatives in them, but they probably won't last that long at your house anyway. All right, so this is why I wore my gloves. This part right here is really sticky, and so sometimes it's hard to just get that first little bit going. Let me see if I can get this one going. There we go. You know, the first one's always the worst to get out. So now hopefully the rest of them will be very pretty. Yep, this is coming up beautifully. Oh, that's gonna be nice. So I will probably wrap up some of these and give away because we can't eat all of these. Let me see how I can get these on the ends. We'll take it from this side. Now, this is a part you don't see in recipes. You know how things actually work. So there's that little bit there you could still nibble on. All right, so that is our fruit and oat squares. I hope you enjoy making these as much as you'll enjoy eating them.